One May afternoon in 1967, a man emerged from the woods near Manitoba and stopped a police car. His shirt was missing, his chest was badly burned, and he was vomiting on the side of the road. When the policeman approached, the stranger warned him to stay away. He claimed he had been burned by a flying saucer and that he might be radioactive. No one believed him. But in the decades that followed, unexplained scars continued to appear on his body. His story never changed. The curious thing is that in all these years, he never once claimed to have encountered aliens. All he wanted was for someone to listen to his story. This is not a legend born on the internet. The case was documented, investigated, and eventually came to the attention of Canadian authorities. Decades later, it remains one of the most mysterious and best documented alleged encounters with an unexplained flying object. What really happened near Falcon Lake that May day? What does Stefan Michalak see? What traces does the encounter leave on his body? And why does this case continue to puzzle researchers, scientists, and government officials more than half a century later? Today we will follow every known detail and try to understand why this particular case is becoming one of the most compelling mysteries in UFO history. Before we begin the story, we remove the brief advertising integration and return to the events. Stefan Michalak had hidden behind a large rock and was carefully sketching the unusual object, which was about half a football field away from it. On a rocky clearing stood a disc-shaped device about 14 feet in diameter and approximately 15 feet high, with a dome at its top. Its surface looked like polished aluminum or matte stainless steel. Stefan was not panicking. The 51-year-old Polish immigrant had survived the horrors of a Nazi concentration camp during World War II. After such a past, few things could truly frighten him. The object before him was strange, but above all, it was his curiosity. After about half an hour of observation, he was already thinking about returning to the real reason he was in the woods. About 90 miles east of Winnipeg lies the White Shell region, a vast Canadian wilderness. In 1967, Stefan often came here to look for quartz veins, because he knew that where there was quartz, there was often silver. By profession, he was an industrial mechanic, but his great passion was the search for silver ore. Every weekend, he would go around the forest with a hammer and chisel, searching for new deposits. On Friday, May the 19th, he arrived at Falcon Lake and checked into a local motel. The next morning, he discovered a promising vein of quartz and set to work. At about 12:15 in the afternoon, the silence was suddenly broken. A whole flock of geese flew out of the lake in panic. When Stefan looked up, he saw two bright red cigar-shaped objects descending from the sky. As they descended, they gradually changed shape and became discs. One object paused for a few seconds above the trees, then abruptly rose back into the sky and disappeared. The other continued to descend until it landed smoothly on a rocky clearing about 160 feet away. The red glow gradually turned to orange, then a metallic gray color, similar to stainless steel. To Stefan, this meant only one thing: the object was extremely hot. He stayed behind the stone and continued to watch. Since nothing was happening, he took out a notebook and began to carefully sketch every detail: the shape, the color, and the fluttering of the air. After about 30 minutes, a door slid silently from the side of the disc. A blindingly bright light with an unusual hue between blue and purple burst out of it. Curiosity got the better of him. Stefan left his hiding place and approached. The first thing he noticed was that the object had no wheels, landing gear, or any visible landing system. It just stood motionless on the bare rock. There was no visible engine, but there was a low-frequency hum that was felt rather than heard. There were no markings on the hull, no signs, flags, or identifying symbols. The metal surface was so smooth that it clearly reflected his image. As someone who had worked with metal all his life, that was what impressed him the most. The walls appeared to be about 5 feet thick, but they were not solid. The internal structure resembled a hollow metal honeycomb. When he reached the open door, he put on his welding goggles with tinted lenses and peered inside. He saw a room filled with moving light panels. Beams of different colors moved in horizontal and diagonal trajectories, and the lights flashed in sequences that never repeated. He found neither a control panel nor buttons. The room seemed empty. Then he smelled the strong smell of sulfur, ozone, and burnt electronics. For the first time, he felt real anxiety. At that moment, he heard voices. It sounded like two people talking behind a closed door. He couldn't make out the words, but he was sure there was a crew inside. Stefan didn't think it was an alien ship. He assumed he was observing a secret experimental device, probably American, created during the space race. Since the object hadn't moved for almost an hour, he decided it might have suffered an accident. He called out in English, offering them help. There was no response. Then he tried Russian, German, Italian, French, Ukrainian, and again, English. The years of war and his exile gave him the opportunity to speak several languages. After his last attempt, the voices suddenly fell silent, and then the object came to life. The engine suddenly started at full power. The humming became even louder, and the heat around the object increased sharply. Stefan felt like he was in an oven. Still wearing his thick welding gloves, he decided to carefully touch the casing to see how hot it was. This turned out to be a huge mistake. The moment his fingers touched the metal, he felt the rubber of his gloves begin to soften and melt against his skin. At that moment, the door closed and the object began to rotate. Stefan then noticed a small rectangular grid measuring approximately 23 by 15 centimeters. A second later, a jet of hot gas erupted through it, hitting him squarely in the chest. Stefan immediately realized that his clothes were on fire. He tore off his shirt and began to put out the flames. When he looked up, the object was already rising from the cliff. Only a moment earlier, it had been deafeningly noisy, and now it was moving in complete silence. He felt only the airwave, and then the object disappeared. He was left alone in the clearing. His chest was badly burned, his head ached unbearably, and shortly after he began to vomit. As he walked towards the road, he kept stopping, vomiting, and moving on. Meanwhile, the burns on his skin began to swell, gradually forming an unusual geometric pattern. When he reached the highway, he stopped a police car and told what had happened. The policeman didn't believe him, got back in his car, and drove away. That evening, Stefan returned to Winnipeg. His 9-year-old son noticed not so much the burns as the strong smell. The whole room smelled of sulfur and burnt electronics. The smell didn't come from his clothes, but rather from his skin itself, and it lingered for weeks. Stefan was convinced he was exposed to radiation. He couldn't keep food down. In just 7 days, his weight dropped from 80 to 70 kilograms. He suffered severe headaches, seizures, and temporary memory loss. Doctors found raised red burns on his upper abdomen and singed hair along his forehead. The most unusual thing was that the pattern of the wounds matched the opening of the grate he had seen on the object. Even the sweatshirt he had been wearing on the day of the incident was burned in the exact same pattern. The studies also showed a severely reduced number of lymphocytes, a type of white blood cell vital to the immune system. A radiologist from the United States stated that such results are typical of whole-body irradiation, with a dose of between 100 and 200 Röntgens. At about 400 Röntgens, such radiation is usually lethal. According to him, Stefan was exposed for only a few seconds. If he had been there longer, he probably would not have survived. Even more mysterious was that the burns kept reappearing. They would heal, disappear, and then return again. For months, doctors tried various treatments without success. Gradually, they discovered that the sores appeared approximately every 112 days. More than a dozen doctors in Canada and the United States investigated the case without finding an explanation. Stefan even visited the famous Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. After all possible examinations, the doctors did not find the cause, but they came to one definite conclusion. The psychiatric report indicated that Stefan Michalak did not suffer from a mental illness. Whatever happened to him, he wasn't making it up. While doctors tried to explain his symptoms, Canadian authorities launched their own investigation. The case attracted the attention of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the Air Force, the Ministries of Health and Defense, and even the U.S. Air Force. The Falcon Lake investigation grew to nearly 300 pages. 5 days after the incident, the first military team began searching the site. Initially, they found nothing. Later, Stefan was put on a helicopter and taken back to the area, but even then, the location was not found. The biggest skeptic in the case was squadron leader Paul Busey. He was convinced that the story was a hoax and that Stefan had hallucinated after drinking alcohol. The investigation revealed that Stefan had indeed had a few beers at the motel the night before. Busey used this as the basis for his theory. He took Stefan back to the same bar and observed his behavior. After a few drinks, Stefan calmly told the story again. For Busey, that was enough. In his report, he concluded that Stefan was drunk or had a severe hangover and hallucinated. He even offered a second theory, that he fell onto a hot metal grill. But on June 25th, everything changed. Stefan himself discovered the scene of the incident and led investigators right to it, only about 50 yards from an area that had already been searched. At the site, the circle where the object had stood was still clearly visible. Samples of the soil, rocks, and plants were taken and sent to the crime lab. The results surprised everyone. The soil was found to contain an unusually high level of radium-226. The laboratory identified the area as a serious radiation risk. Even Paul Busey was forced to admit 3 inexplicable facts: Stephen's illness, the burns on his body, and the circle on the rock. And in his official report, he described all 3 with just one word: inexplicable. A year later, Stefan returned to the site and found 2 metal rods hidden under moss in a crevice of the rock. Laboratory analysis showed that one contained 93% silver, the other 96%. Both were coated with crushed uranium and were radioactive. The strange thing was that the area had already been searched numerous times by police, military, and radiation specialists, without anyone finding these objects. Even Paul Busey sent a message to his headquarters admitting, "If this is a hoax, someone has gone to great lengths to organize it." While the laboratories continued their analyses, the Canadian government began to gradually restrict access to the information. When the issue was raised in Parliament, some of the documents had already been removed from the file with the explanation that their full publication was not in the public interest. Stefan himself never claimed to know exactly what he saw. The only thing he wanted for the rest of his life was to receive a medical explanation for what happened. No such thing was ever found. The scars remained on his body for decades. He died in 1999 at the age of 83. In 2018, the Canadian government included the Falcon Lake case in a special commemorative coin that even glows in the dark. But the question remains, did Stefan Michalak really experience an encounter with an unexplained flying object, or is there a completely rational explanation? Skeptics point to several arguments. According to them, the characteristic grid of scars appeared only 8 months after the incident, and the first doctor described more uneven burns. A psychiatrist from the Mayo Clinic even admits the possibility that some of the scars were self-inflicted. Another theory is that natural uranium deposits in the area could explain the radiation, and the discovered metal rods were probably placed later. Still, a few uncomfortable facts remain. Stefan did indeed lose 22 pounds in just 1 week. The burns were documented the very next day. The burnt vest still exists today and is kept at the University of Manitoba. And most importantly, no one has yet been able to convincingly explain exactly how the initial burns occurred in 1967. There was always a mention of a small book that Stefan would give out to people, but it never made him any profit. On the contrary, he would give it away for free. His visit to the Mayo Clinic was also entirely at his expense, an expensive test that he paid for himself. Paul Busey, the man who tried hardest to prove that Stefan was lying, ultimately described the case as inexplicable. The Ministry of National Defense also admitted that it had no evidence to refute Stefan Michalak's story. Later, the American study, Project Condon, classified the Falcon Lake case as unexplained. The report even included an unusual conclusion. If the encounter was real, it would mean that unknown flying vehicles do indeed exist in our environment. That's an extremely strong statement for an official scientific report. If the case was a hoax, that means the 51-year-old mechanic voluntarily burned his chest. He lost 22 pounds in just a week, fooled more than a dozen doctors and psychiatrists, and never changed his story. However, if his story is true, then something landed on that rock that we still can't explain. That's why the case remains unsolved. But perhaps the most important part of this story is not the flying object itself. It is about a man who told the truth as he experienced it. He told it to the military, to doctors, to government institutions, and to anyone who was willing to listen to him. And all too often, he met only disbelief. The first person he met after the most difficult moments of his life was a police officer. Instead of help, he received rejection. Stefan never insisted that anyone believe in flying saucers. He just wanted people to believe in him. Maybe that's the hardest part. We will all, sooner or later, meet someone who tells us a story that sounds unbelievable. They may be wrong, they may be deluded. But it's also possible that he's telling the truth. You don't have to believe every inexplicable story. But it's always worth listening to the person standing across from you and asking for help. And sometimes the most important decision is to simply stop and listen to it. Thank you for sticking with me until the very end of this story. The Falcon Lake case continues to be one of the most puzzling and best documented mysteries. Whether Stefan Michalak experienced something we still can't explain, or whether there's a completely rational explanation behind it all, is a question that everyone must answer for themselves. And now, I want to hear your opinion. What do you think? Do you think Stefan was telling the truth, or do you think there is another logical explanation for what happened? Write your opinion in the comments. I would be very interested to read the different points of view. If you found the video interesting and liked it, support the channel with a like. Subscribe to the channel and press the bell so you don't miss the next documentary investigations into ancient mysteries, forbidden history, UFOs, lost civilizations, and unexplained phenomena. If you think this story deserves to be seen by other people, share the video with friends and family. Thank you once again for your trust, for your time, and for being with me until the end, until the next mystery.